Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Krishna consciousness as given to us by Srila Prabhupada is unlike an ordinary religion, or even unlike Krishna consciousness as given by others, inasmuch as perfection is required. It's not enough just to be a member of an institution, or to identify oneself with a religion. I am a Christian, I am a Muslim, I am a Hindu, or whatever. But there is the pushing for perfection, and anything less than that is considered improper. Of course, some lenience is there. It's not expected that everyone can come to the perfect stage immediately, but sincerity is required. This sincere effort, constant, ongoing effort for personal purification. So it is very demanding. We shouldn't be surprised if many people do not take to Krishna consciousness, although that we desire that many people should do. But considering the nature of this world, the nature of material bondage, and considering that it is the process of Krishna consciousness is very demanding. One is expected to act in a manner for purification at every moment. What are considered normal or acceptable motives among non-devotees? It's not acceptable among devotees to have any measure of personal indulgence or exploitation of others, even at any level. It's not acceptable. It's an impurity. Some quotations from Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada wrote in a letter, there are 2 verses in the Chanakya Shlok, how a family or an institution can be glorified or burned into ashes by one person. Srila Prabhupada is talking about his disciples. How a good disciple can glorify, can bring a good name to a family or an institution, whereas a bad one can bring a bad name. So Srila Prabhupada continues. The Chanakya Pandit says that if there is one tree in the forest producing a nice aromatic flower, that one tree can glorify the whole forest by the flavor of its flower. The whole area, you may say, oh, what a nice forest this is. The whole area is smells so sweet. Just because of one tree producing beautifully smelling flowers. Similarly, if there's one tree in whose cavity there is a little fire, that one tree can burn into ashes the whole forest. In a family, if there is one good boy, he can glorify the whole family. And similarly, if there is a bad boy, he can turn the whole family into ashes. Similarly, in this institution, if there is a bad disciple, he can burn the whole institution into ashes. The governing body commission's duty is therefore to see that every member is following the rules and regulations and chanting 16 rounds regularly on the beads. I hope the GBC, in cooperation with the sannyasis in their training program, will be able to keep vigilant systematically in order to keep the society as pure as possible. Keep vigilant systematically in order to keep the society as pure as possible. Those are few words which, if we would hope that if they were instituted, that our society could be as pure as possible. We don't expect 100% purity in this world, but we can hope and pray for. And not just hope and pray for, but if this order of Srila Prabhupada is instituted, then the society can be as pure as possible. Another quotation from Srila Prabhupada. We are trying to preach this philosophy in that way. Maybe very small number. Maybe we are very small in number. But ekas chandras tamohanti king na chara sahasrasaha. If there is one moon, that is sufficient. What is the use of millions of stars twinkling? So that is our propaganda. If one man can understand what Krishna philosophy is, then my preaching is successful, that's all. We don't want many millions of stars with no light. What is the use of millions of stars with no light? That is Chanakya Pandit's advice. Varameko goni putro nacha murka shatairapi. One son, if he is learned, that is sufficient. What is the use of hundreds of sons, all fools and rascals? Ekas chandras tamohanti nachatara sahasrashaha. One moon is sufficient to illuminate. There is no need of millions of stars. Similarly, we are not after many millions of disciples. I want to see that one disciple has understood Krishna's philosophy. That is success. So, of course, there are many quotations from Srila Prabhupada. He was certainly interested in preaching Krishna consciousness very widely. He didn't go all over the world like that, or go all around like that Greek philosopher, his name Dionysius, something like that, who walked around looking with a lamp in the daytime, which seems like a pretty stupid thing. But when he was asked what he was doing, he said he was looking for one honest person. So, with the idea that going with a lamp in the daytime seems absurd, so the idea that he was looking for an honest person, that's the implication. So Srila Prabhupada certainly wanted to preach very widely, and he had great faith in the holy name that people can become purified by taking to the process of Krishna consciousness. At the same time, he warned that we should be very serious in our practice of Krishna consciousness, not superficial, and that even one completely sincere and pure disciple would be very pleasing to him. Lecturing on this theme, once he said that I would be satisfied, I don't have the quotation here, I would be satisfied if even one of my disciples was a completely pure devotee, but by my Guru Maharaj's mercy, I have many disciples. who are very sincere. I'd like to, seeing many devotees here, I'd like to remind those who are not my disciples here that everyone's welcome. If you want to come and listen, thank you very much. But I'm specifically continuing. I was addressing my disciples recently in Puri, and I'm just continuing on that theme. So I'm not... you can just understand. They're specifically addressed to my disciples because in the last year has been a difficult one for myself and others due to some dealings between certain of my disciples which have been frankly quite distasteful. So I'm addressing that here without mentioning any names or specific instances. We heard from Srila Prabhupada. He said that his Guru Maharaj, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, had left this world early due to being dissatisfied with certain of his disciples. And I often wondered about that, thinking that, well, such a towering acharya with so much to give to the world, then why should he leave? But on my own level, just not actually fit even to mention the name of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. But I can begin to get a little insight into that. Can be very distasteful and very disturbing when disciples who one accepts in good faith and reciprocates, and they again, I'm not blaming everyone by any means, but there have been some very distasteful and non-Vaishnava behavior, which is you just don't want to be involved with it, but on the other hand you can't avoid it. So Srila Prabhupada, in these quotes from Chanakya Pandit, stated that one good disciple can give fragrance to the whole forest, whereas one bad disciple or family member can destroy the whole forest. So obviously the implication is that we should we should be careful not to be the bad follower or disciple, and strive our utmost to be good. And naturally there will be some devotees who are outstanding, some who are really difficult cases, and many shades of grey in between. I often, well, not often, but sometimes have noted or observed that because I moved a lot among members of the Gauriya Math when I was researching for the work on Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. So I observed that within the Gauriya Math there are some very sincere and some very exalted devotees, and some really difficult cases you wonder what they're doing as a devotee at all, and many in between, the devotees at various levels of advancement and of commitment. And it's the same in ISKCON. It's not different in that regard, that there's some very exalted and some sincere and very dedicated and committed devotees, some who you wonder Why did they ever bother putting their hand in a bead bag, if they ever do? And there are many in between who are like that, at various levels of commitment, many sincerely trying. It's not that the Gauriya Math is very different from ISKCON in that regard. And actually our general attitude should be to think of all devotees as glorious. Jai bhaje shai baro abhakti hina cha. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said that anyone who worships Krishna is a great person. And non-devotees, however, whatever they may be, they're all rejected. So our general attitude should be to glorify all devotees, but at the same time, we see here in these quotations, as in many others, that we have to maintain a sense of discrimination also, to see what is actually devotional behavior which should be encouraged, and not that everything that goes on in the name of devotion can be actually accepted as real devotion. If we fail to discriminate between what is actual devotion and what is not devotion in the name of glorifying all Vaishnavas, then we are inviting the development of apasampradayas or non-devotional tendencies in the name of devotional service. It seems that especially in the modern age, especially in Kali Yuga, it's almost expected that every guru will have at least some difficult disciples, especially as there is a great push to spread Krishna consciousness widely, and we're trying to encourage people to come into Krishna consciousness with the general understanding and hope and faith that if anyone takes to this process of Krishna consciousness, even in the beginning, if they are not very well situated, that if they adhere to the process, that gradually they can become elevated. And we do see many cases of people who in the beginning were not very much inclined toward Krishna consciousness, or maybe even inimical toward it, but who gradually by the association of devotees become devotees, and very sincere and committed devotees. But nevertheless, in Kali Yuga, and it is almost expected that every guru will have some difficult cases. Recently, one godbrother was he was telling me about, reporting to me about the situation of one of my disciples, and he seemed concerned that I didn't appear to be overly concerned when he was and he said that well, you don't seem to be that concerned. And I said that well, you know, there's nothing much I can do if someone's decided, because the idea is there, why didn't the Guru go and tell the disciple to be good? But those who know what should be done and what should not be done, and practically make a decision to do that which should not be done, in most cases you can't do anything to change them. And I also said to my godbrother that it's almost expected, when you initiate, it's almost expected that some percentage are going to go away. We even at the time of initiating, we know that it's, of course, it's not destined, but practically we see that so many people take to Krishna consciousness and then they go away, or they don't follow properly. But what I've been talking to more about here is those who, not that those who go away, but those who stay within the society of devotees and utilize the position, especially the position of being a leader at some level, to manipulate, coerce, exploit devotees, to exercise some unhealthy psychological control over them. So naturally this is a cause of concern for myself, that devotees who take the position of a leader and in some ways are good at that. They have some outgoing tendencies and strong character or whatever by which they're able to, at least here in India where people are somewhat open to Krishna consciousness, able to bring people into into some kind of Krishna consciousness. I often think that devotees in India who might be thinking that they're great preachers, we should send them to Japan or America or somewhere where it's people are not. It's not nearly so easy to bring people into Krishna consciousness, and they might get some realization of how difficult it can be to preach Krishna consciousness among people who are not very inclined toward it. Or even in America, many people may be at least somewhat open to it, but to find people ready to make that sincere commitment to Krishna consciousness and to stay with it over the years is quite rare. So, bringing people into devotional service means that we know that, especially in the beginning, it's natural there'll be some level of neophyteness, foolishness, maybe some bad behavior, but insincerity is not appreciated. But sometimes you may have to indulge such devotees. It's like you can't control them, or they can't hear or rectify or even begin to understand in their own mind that they really need to make some change in their whole outlook. So what can you do? It's very difficult to know what to do when they're so convinced that what they're doing is right, even though it's causing disturbance. Of course, causing disturbance in and of itself is not necessarily a bad thing, but causing disturbance in the progressive advancement of others' devotional service, because the whole conception of Krishna consciousness, of some psychologically maladjusted individuals, their whole conception of Krishna consciousness is blended with their own desires for being recognized and for being known as a leader or a great preacher or whatever. So, what to do with such cases who they can't see that there's some need of rectification. They can't even begin to admit that or they may admit, but just in a they may say, yeah, well, maybe there's something wrong, but it's not that bad that everyone's getting so upset. What's wrong with them all? They're all ganging up on me. So if you tell them the actual truth of their situation, they won't accept it, and they may just go away from Krishna consciousness altogether, or they just can't admit that I need to undergo some deep reform, because they're so used to being in the position of a leader and others following them and glorifying them, not recognizing that they're living on that glorification and that feeling of being leader, not that their leadership in Krishna consciousness is actually meant for. The prime motive is not to selflessly serve the mission of Srila Prabhupada, and the prime motive is not to benefit others by giving them Krishna consciousness. That may be there, but it's mixed with the whole feeling of being a leader, being a controller, and being recognized and honored by others, which all motives which are quite opposite to that of pure devotional service. So those who are leaders, the first qualification of a leader in Krishna consciousness is that one should be a very good follower. One should identify oneself primarily as a follower, as a disciple. And if one is given the service to lead others, but he should understand that he's leading them in following. He never ceased to be a follower. He never ceased to be a disciple and a follower. Those who, without being good followers, become leaders, they simply spread their anarthas and implant their anarthas into others in the name of Krishna consciousness. Recently, in a conversation with a godbrother, he mentioned, talking about gurus with very geographically widespread disciples. He said that the emperor is never in full control of his empire. That is I guess you could say a fact of political science. Of course, nowadays we don't have empires in the sense that were common in the world until fairly recently. The last great empire was the British Empire. But the very fact that it's very widely spread means that there will be, in far-flung corners, especially in far-flung corners of the empire, there will always be local leaders who are supposed to administer on behalf of the emperor, but because the emperor is far away and cannot supervise or control a leader in a faraway spot, then the leader himself may just give nominal respect to the emperor far away in London, while meanwhile acting practically as an individual despot, or may just secede from the empire altogether. So it's very difficult, just as it's very difficult to hold an empire together. So similarly, when a guru has many disciples, and especially if they're geographically widely spread, it is difficult to keep on top of them. Of course, it's not exactly like a political arrangement, but the analogy is close enough that it has to be that in such a situation that individual local leaders will take charge of others, and local leaders are required. But the tendency to misuse that confidence that is placed in them, that can, and as we have recently seen, can be a cause of much disturbance. So the first, or the most important service that all leaders in Krishna consciousness can perform is more than preaching widely and, as we say, making many devotees. This idea, I am making devotees. So the first thing is our own purification, self-purification. Yeah, so the first service that every devotee has to do, especially those who are taking on this very heavy responsibility of guiding others in Krishna consciousness, is to ourselves introspect, to be strong in spiritual life. As Srila Prabhupada in this quotation that I just read about the one good disciple can glorify an institution, one bad disciple can destroy it. Therefore, Srila Prabhupada said, the governing body commission, in association with the sannyasis, should be very vigilant to see that all the devotees chant 16 rounds and follow the 4 regulated principles. And of course, apart from this, Srila Prabhupada, he also gave other formulae, rising early, attending classes, and so on. These are necessary for purification. This comes first. Both are required. Both preaching and proper behavior in devotional service. Prachar kore keho na kore achar, achar kore keho na kore prachar. Achar prachar name koroho dui karj, tumi sharva guru tumi jagate arj. Sanatana Goswami said to Haridas Thakur that some people preach but they don't assiduously practice devotional service. Some, they are very strong in their sadhana, but they don't preach much. But Sanatana said to Haridas Thakur that you do both, therefore you are the guru of everyone, you're the best person in the world. I'm going to read now from the writings of Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur in his commentary on Chaitanya Bhagavat Antyakanda, chapter 7, text 36. In this verse, the word Ekanta Das is used. So commenting on this, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur says, the phrase Ekanta Das, or unalloyed servants, refers to those who do not have and never will have separate interests. Many business-minded people with incomplete vision oppose the eternal master-servant relationship. Their service is hardly unalloyed. Their deceitful display of opportunistic service is a manifestation of cheating, not of pure devotional service. There's very heavy words. That Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur is commenting here that some persons, they appear to be practicing devotional service, but they have separate interests. They're business-minded. Not devotionally minded, business-minded. In other words, they're performing some activity with the mentality of, how can I gain from it? In a material, in a mundane way. So they actually oppose the eternal master-servant relationship, even if superficially they act in that relationship. And he refers to it as a deceitful display of opportunistic service, that is a manifestation of cheating. So, continuing. Living entities averse to the service of the Lord exhibit samples of eternal service for as long as it suits their desires, but the moment their sense gratification is disturbed, they immediately give up service and begin to harass and rebel against their master by posing themselves as masters. And again, without getting into details, I found this description quite apt of certain persons who were apparently performing some service, but then when it became detected that they had some other motive and they were checked in that, then they immediately give up that service and begin to harass and rebel against their master by posing themselves as masters. I'm going to read now a quotation from writings of Suhotra Maharaj, who is quoting Srila Jiva Goswami. Srila Jiva Goswami warns in his Bhakti Sandarbha that there are offenders to the holy name who are achikitsya, or incorrigible. Anyway, I remember that I discussed this once with Suhotra Swami. He was very interested to hear this description. Achikitsya, or incorrigible. Jnana lava durvidagdhastra achikitsya advadupeksha. As soon as they acquire a little knowledge from the Krishna conscious community of devotees, they become insolent and arrogant. They are excluded from the genuine devotional community because of 3 kinds of offense to the holy name: sadhu ninda, blasphemy of devotees; guru avagya, disregard of the spiritual master; and shruti shastra ninda, blasphemy of the Vedic literatures. So Suhotra Swami goes on to comment on this. The incorrigible offender, achikitsya, is incorrigible, literally untreatable. Chikitsa means medical treatment. Achikitsya means hopeless case. So the incorrigible offender never admits his offenses. He cannot understand that the mercy of the spiritual master and the association of pure devotees are indispensable for chanting of the holy name. He considers the spiritual master not a transcendental teacher, but a worldly one, and tries to measure the person and instructions of the Guru by his own mental standards. Thus he commits Guru Avagya. Because he values worldly knowledge and accomplishments, he looks down upon the simple devotees who have surrendered themselves to devotional service. Thus he commits Sadhu Ninda. Finally, he studies the revealed scriptures as if they were ordinary books, accepting whatever seems to support his preconceived notions and rejecting the rest. Thus he commits Shruti Shastra Ninda, blasphemy of the Vedic scriptures. The incorrigible offender mistakes the growth of these and other offenses within his heart for the growth of the Bhakti Lata, the plant of devotion. He mistakes his fallen condition for great advancement. That's the end of the quote from Suhotra Maharaj. So again, speaking specifically to among my disciples here, in the last few years, some of you have worked very hard and sacrificed very much to start programs for Gurukul and Varnashram, rural communities, in pursuance of some of Srila Prabhupada's cherished desires. Unfortunately, there are some who practically act like enemies within our camp by discouraging others and saying, don't do this, don't join a Varnashram community, don't send your children to Gurukul. So in one sense we can understand their concern. Recently I likened this to the persons in Navadvip Dham who opposed, the Hindus there, who opposed Nimai Pandit Sankirtan movement. In many ways what they said would seem to be practical and reasonable. they said that if Nimai goes on with this Sankirtan, then the Muslims, they'll come down on us very heavily, and we'll be because of this Nimai, all of us, even those of us who are not interested in his Sankirtan, we'll all be persecuted by the Muslims. Why doesn't he just be realistic? He's going to bring a lot of trouble to us. It seems good now, but it'll be a lot of trouble. So in many ways it might have seemed that they were just being realistic and sensible. But they are described as blasphemers. So that is comparable to those who quietly whisper in the ears of others, don't get involved in this, it won't work, you'll spoil your life, you have to, let's be we can chant Hare Krishna, but anyway we should just have a job and work hard, and we can chant Hare Krishna in our spare time or whatever. So we are trying to establish these programs, and we know it is difficult. It goes against the whole grain of modern society, but Srila Prabhupada very much wanted this. And if we want to merge into modern society, then it is going to be very difficult to practice pure devotional service, because the whole flow of modern society is away from pure devotional service toward sense gratification. So I would request among my disciples, if you don't like these programs of Gurukul and Varnashram and this and that, at least please don't try to discourage others from doing it. No one's forcing you, no one's pressurizing anyone to send their children to a Gurukul or to go to a farm community. There's no pressure, it's all voluntary. If you don't like it, don't go, but please don't discourage others don't take it as your duty to tell others not to get involved. So, thank you to the great majority of you who are endeavoring in this way to help with these projects, pushing on book distribution, and everyone to what extent they can do. For some devotees, practically the full extent of their devotional service is looking after their children, which Srila Prabhupada also said to one of his female disciples who was engaged in deity worship, that after she had a baby, he told her that now your duty is not deity worship, it is child worship. They have to look after the children and raise them as far as possible in devotional service. So not everyone can be performing great activities, but all activities in devotional service are great, and it is our sincerity that will be appreciated by Krishna. I know some very, I think we all know some very qualified devotees who nevertheless don't initiate, because one of my godbrothers, I asked him, why don't you initiate? He said, it's so much headache, I can perform. Another of my godbrothers, who I sometimes confide in, and I ask him about his advice about various things. He said that I'm just glad I'm not a guru, because it's everyone. That is the service, part of the service, that one has to accept so many difficulties. One of them is in the form of difficult disciples, but I'm not blaming or accusing the majority of you who are really dedicating very sincerely in Srila Prabhupada's service, and thank you very much for that. Actually, there are many points here, other points. One thing that Jayadvaita Swami has been promoting for several years now, more and more, is that there are so many devotees in our movement who are growing older and whose children are grown up. You don't have to go on working all your life. Once your children are settled into their adult life, the elder devotee, they can be vanaprasthas. There are many such devotees here in Mayapur, and it doesn't have to be in Mayapur, it can be anywhere where they can, you don't have to go on working all your life. You can come out and serve the mission of Srila Prabhupada and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu on a full-time basis. If you no longer have a direct family responsibility, and among my disciples there are several who have done that. They've retired from the working life early and are fully engaged in Krishna's service. And those of you who have the financial means to do so, you can, even before your children, there are not so many like that, but even before your children are married and settled or whatever, you can come out and serve the mission full time. There's a lot of work to do. Hani bhutani gachanti hayamalayam. People are going to hell every day, and we have to do whatever we can to try to help them by bringing them to Krishna consciousness. Jodi ama prati sneho take shabaka tobe Krishna beti rikto nagaibaya. That is the ultimate goal. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, to all the devotees who would come to see him, expressing great affection, he would say, if you're actually affectionate to me, then please do one thing, just talk about Krishna. So ultimately we have to talk about Krishna. That we have to remember that in the matter of preaching Krishna consciousness, there's so many considerations, so many wrong ideas, wrong philosophies to combat. There's so many matters, legal matters and administrative matters, and so many worldly matters that we have to consider. But we always have to remember that the ultimate goal is, as Srila Prabhupada often put it, is to be mad after Krishna. So in our many activities which are required in preaching Krishna consciousness, let us always remember that the real point of it all is that we are to manmana bhavamad bhakto madhyaji mang namaskuru, to think of Krishna, be his devotee, bow down to Krishna, worship Krishna. And preaching means to give others the opportunity to develop that consciousness also. So Hare Krishna, I finished earlier than I thought I would. So if there are any questions, please ask now. Hare Krishna. Yes, please. Do we have another microphone? Just waiting. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama. Or you can tell me and I'll repeat it.
Sometimes we come in situation to correct senior devotees or those who consider themselves senior. So, I mean, what do you do? Do you tell the Guru to correct them or you correct them?
In the matter of correcting senior devotees,
And then also,
or those who consider themselves senior, it may be required for a devotee in the kind of situation you're in, a position of responsibility for a particular project. You may feel that you have to do so, because can you give an example? There may be millions, but I can't think of any just right now.
That say that those who say senior devotees, which by their activity and behavior, they all see that one of the leaders is the illusion, the wilder, that he thinks he is senior, but they don't really match his. And then
someone who is senior and is respected, but actually there are clear symptoms according to Shastra that he is somewhat deviated from the proper line of Krishna consciousness. And other seniors see that, but they don't say anything. What to do? What should we do? I'm still asking the same question myself. I thought you were talking about at the very high levels here, is it, mostly? Many years ago, again talking about Suhotra Swami, I told you this before also, when he was chairman of the GBC, probably many devotees have never heard of Suhotra Swami. He passed away and he's not much glorified. Anyway, he was chairman of the GBC at that, and I happened to meet him in some small town in Poland where he was hiding out, you could say, at some Nam Hata to do some writing. And somehow or other I also went there. It was some strange coincidence. So in the course of discussing, I said to him that, there are so many, it happens in the GBC that GBC members, sometimes they do things which even beginning devotees can understand that they shouldn't do, and it's very obvious to everyone, but the GBC members don't say anything to them. Why is that? And he laughed and said that, well, when we all get together, there's this kind of collegiate spirit by which we can't correct each other. That was his answer. That we don't want to upset the friendship. Some devotees do that, and they're not very liked or popular for that, as Prahlad Swami told me. He does take the trouble to approach privately and personally certain leaders and say, excuse me, there's something you should take note of. And he said that usually the effect of doing that is that he loses friends. But actually, if there is something which requires rectifying, and someone points that out, then we should take that person as our friend, isn't it? It is a very difficult situation within our movement in which I just had this experience recently. One devotee told me that, a devotee from Delhi mentioned something about one of our big leaders. I said, you know about that? And he said, yeah, everyone knows about that. What do you mean everyone? And I said, well, I live in Delhi and everyone I speak to, they all know about it. So it's something, I don't want to talk about it here and now, something one of our big leaders has done, which even very junior devotees can understand is something very wrong, and it circulates among them. And this devotee was asking me, what are we supposed to make of it? That it's going on and nothing is said and life just goes on as if nothing had ever happened. So that will create confusion and erode the faith of devotees. And another thing it may do is they may make them think, well, if the big leaders can do all kinds of nonsense, then and they lose their sense of idealism, and then what's the what's the use of really trying to be sincere when it's like that? Then they also become like that at their own level. That I've seen also. We're able to get away with it because one reason is because there's no big Gauriya Math sannyasi at the moment taking away all our devotees. So that's one reason we can get. There's nowhere to go unless you want to go to Ritvikism, which is quite unattractive. So that's one reason we can get away with it, I suppose. But it's not satisfying. What should we do? Should we, leaders who, well, what should we do? That's in the teachings of Srila Prabhupada, that conversation in which between when Satsvarupa Maharaj and Tamal Krishna Maharaj, July the 9th or something, there's some who know it very well, those about the future leadership of the Krishna consciousness movement, about gurus and initiation in Krishna consciousness. And then Tamal Krishna Maharaj also asked about GBCs, and Srila Prabhupada said that if they, I can't remember the exact words now, but if they misbehave, then they should be replaced. He said they should all be ideal, acharya-like. I quoted that yesterday. They should all be ideal, acharya-like. And Srila Prabhupada said that for now, up to now we've been doing for working. In other words, Srila Prabhupada has overseen many discrepancies, but he said that now we should be strict. So if leaders perform activities which, if a junior devotee did the same thing in a smaller way, they'd be kicked out of the movement and given a bad name and never allowed back. But if you're bigger, you can get away with it. One thing is, I believe there is a GBC rule, or there used to be, I don't know, but or there should be, that those who are leaders at every temple presidents, sannyasis, GBC members, whatever, that they should have visible exemplary sadhana, rising early, as Srila Prabhupada states in many letters. Rise early, go to Mangalarti, chant 16 rounds, and attend classes and all these things. So that should be required of all leaders. And if they don't do it, because leader means first and foremost a spiritual leader, not a manager or an administrator. So if they're not doing it, then they won't be able to inspire others to do it, and others may think it's not important. And in fact, years ago when I was a temple president, I told one devotee, look, you've got to get up and go to Mangalarti. You're missing every morning. He said, well, my guru doesn't go, why should I go? He said to me. So, if for any reason, even including health, if one is not able to do these things, I say that they shouldn't be a GBC or a Tam. If they're not physically fit enough to go to Mangalarti, then they're not physically fit enough to be a GBC. Or if they're only physically fit enough to do one of the two things, then better they go to Mangalarti. That would, or should make a... But as we often see, there are meetings of big leaders, and they hardly you'll see them present in the morning program. They're too busy talking. Of course, they have important things to talk about, but that was Srila Prabhupada's standard, which he set himself, of every day going to deity greeting and to giving the class, even when he was sick. He said that I also should go to Mangalarti, but because I'm translating these books, which is such an important service, that I don't do that. So that would be a good formula, which I think would enliven all the devotees, if all the leaders were seen to practice, not that you transcend sadhana bhakti or somehow or other you be. The symptom of a big devotee is that you're never seen in the morning program. I would have thought that you rather there should be more taste for these things. Again, even to state these things can be considered as improper. It may be construed as a personal attack. But it is a good idea. I really think it's an excellent idea. All the leaders should just chant Hare Krishna with everyone else. You can't legislate purity. You can't legislate no one should have any material desires. It'd be great if you could, but well, it wouldn't, because then we'd be all robots, and Krishna consciousness is voluntary. But you can legislate such things as attendance in the morning program. That can be legislated. And that is supposed to be, it is the process of purification. Hare Krishna. Any other question, comment? Yeah, you were second in queue. We don't have any other mic. All right, please speak and I'll repeat the question.
This was my question. How do you purify, try to purify the maximum possible?
How do we purify the maximum possible? Well, we can only take to the process and pray for Krishna's mercy. We don't actually, although we conventionally say that we are purifying ourselves, but actually, Shindatang Swakata Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtanaha Hridyantas To Hyabhadrani Vidhunoti Suhrit Satam. Krishna is the purifier. We can submit ourselves to Him in the matter of hearing and chanting about Krishna. And Krishna, being very kind to the devotees, purifies them. We have to submit ourselves to Krishna. Then, someone else? Who's that, Barbara? Yeah.
So, this question pertains to yesterday's talk.
Yeah.
And so, I mentioned that Jai Swami said that being strict, no one ever fell down from being too strict.
Yeah.
I was kind of trying to understand how, because it's a little difficult to understand fanatical.
What is fanaticism? Well, no one ever fell down from being too strict. Too strict and not strict enough are two interpretation, what's the word? Translations of the word niyamagraha. Among the 6 practices or attitudes which cause the destruction of bhakti, one of them is niyamagraha. Niyama means rules. And niyamagraha can be translated either as niyama agraha, not to follow the rules, not to be strict, or niyamagraha, to be enthusiastic about the rules. In other words, to be strict just for the sake of being strict. So that actually does constitute a type of fall down in itself, if one is more rule conscious than Krishna conscious. But in general, the rules are there because we're supposed to follow them. They're not there so that we can deliberately try and avoid them, or they're not there just. We shouldn't think they're there for others and not for me. They're meant for all devotees. So, at least in our movement, we can think of many cases of those who have fallen down by not being strict. But I can't think of any, maybe because I'm biased, but maybe someone else can offer some case of someone who's fallen down by being too strict. Devotees have been fanatical. Being fanatical and being strict. Well, I've discussed that in the book on speaking strongly in Srila Prabhupada's service, because those who try to act seriously in Krishna consciousness are often accused of being fanatical. In Srila Prabhupada's definition, which was, he actually derived that from Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, who possibly took it from someone else. The parampara definition is that philosophy without religion is mental speculation, and religion without philosophy is sentimentalism or sometimes fanaticism. So by this definition, fanaticism is religion without knowledge. So if A plus B equals C, so C minus B equals A. So if someone is sincerely trying in Krishna consciousness and has knowledge of the process and is not simply a blind dogmatic follower and follows seriously and strictly, that can't be called fanaticism, according to that definition. Fanaticism means to be doggedly attached to something without any understanding. Yeah, anything else? Otherwise we can finish. Hare Krishna. Mataji, which Mataji? I mean, we're supposed to see all women as our mother, but you could say a Mataji or a specific one. Ah, okay, a Mataji. You don't know her name? All right, go on. Is it a good idea to chant more rounds? Yes. Instead of going to Mangalarti? No. We have very clear and specific instructions from Srila Prabhupada in this regard. Why speculate? I mean, there could be a case for it if you're bedridden. If you have a broken leg, just broke your leg, then if you can't go to Mangalarti, then chant more rounds. But in general, one should go to Mangalarti. I must admit, I was late this morning for Mangalarti. Anyway, I didn't. Some bodily disorder. Then you can bring up millions of questions. Is it all right to do this or that or something else? We have a very simple program. It's all laid out there by Srila Prabhupada. I mean, just follow it. It's much easier than trying to speculate, do this, do that, do something else. Hare Krishna! Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai!